Hello, welcome back to Reads of an Apple. My name is Stacy, and we are here today to talk about the very short list that is the books that I read in the month of September. Happy October. Hockey is almost back. I'm currently filming this on the final preseason game for the Colorado Avalanche. So I got a little bit more decked out than I typically do when it comes to preseason, but I figured it's the final one. We have less than a week till the season starts. I'm so ready for hockey to be back. But that's not why we're here. I just had to, if you couldn't tell, I'm so excited. So I needed to get a little bit of it out before the game starts. Anyway, let's talk about books. We're going to go through my stats first, and then we'll talk about the books that I read. So let's just jump into it. As for reading stats, I read 10 books, only 10 books. And honestly, for most of the month, it was like 3, which is crazy. My reading plummeted in the month. But it's fine. It's fine. Other things were happening, and I just wasn't in a reading mood. I was in a let's do stuff mood. And then later on in the month, I started picking up some audiobooks, and then my reading started picking up. So I should have just switched to audiobooks earlier, but it's fine. I now know for October to pick up more audiobooks. So the total pages read between all of those 5 books is 2,783 pages. It also took me longer to read things. So I averaged 2.8 days per book, which is pretty long for me. The average page count is also a lot less than it typically is at 278.30. So pretty far under 300 pages. And she says hello. She's sitting on the bed. As for the page, now she's right here. Hi. As for the page breakdown. Oh, really? What do you have to say? Oh, goodness. Lots of things to say. I read 2 books that were under 100 pages, 2 books that were in the page range of 100 pages, 4 in the 300s, 1 in the 400s, and 1 in the 500s, which is a little surprising that the average was under 300 because I feel like most of the books I read was above that, but math. Of the 10 books I read, 4 of them were by a new author, which is really crazy, and I didn't have any rereads. Okay, on to graphic number 2. I read 2 books for clubs, readathons, or read-alongs. Only one of the book I read had diversity, which is a lot worse than I typically do, and that made me a little disappointed in myself. I also read 1 book that was a standalone. So usually I read almost all books in a series, so that was surprising. 0 of the books I picked up were recommended to me. 1 of these books I previously owned. 1 of these books I have pre-ordered, and I added 2 of these books to my wish list. As for how I read them, I picked up 6 ebooks and 4 audiobooks. Next, let's talk about publishing. So I picked up 7 books that were independently published, 1 book from a small publisher, and 2 that are one of the traditional published, one of the big publisher companies. For decades, 1 of these was published in the 2000s, 1 of them in the 2010s, and the rest of the 8 we're in the 2020s, so once again, skewing towards recent books. And then as for the ages of the main characters, I had 1 book that was considered young adult or younger, 1 book that was a new adult, 4 of them were in their 20s, 1 of them was in their 30s, and 3 of them were supernatural, immortal type creatures. As for where these were located, 1 of these I owned in a digital version. 1 of these was an ARC. 4 of these I checked out from KU. 3 I checked out from Hoopla, and 1 I checked out from Libby. So Libby coming in clutch a little bit here. As for the ratings, my average rating was 4.25, which is pretty high for the month, even with only 10 books, I feel like. And I read 4 5 stars, 3 4 stars, and 3 3.5 stars. So overall, enjoyment-wise, not a bad month for my enjoyment of the books that I read. And then the final graphic that I'll touch base on is genres that I read in. We have 4 contemporary romances, 1 fantasy romance, 2 historical romances, 1 paranormal romance, 1 sci-fi romance, and then 1 just straight fantasy. I think it's supposed to have romantic elements at some point, but not very much. It was like very lightly hinted in, which we'll touch base on shortly. And then as for the contemporaries that I read, I break those down even more into subgenres, and I had 3 small towns and 1 that I just called an office romance, which isn't necessarily a subgenre, but it's on my list, so that's how we're separating them out, at least for 2023. So let's talk about the books. I started out the month with some book club books. The Buzzing About Romance book club book for this month was Shifting Gears by Melanie Moreland, but that's book 3 in the series, and I cannot start in the middle of a series. So the first book I picked up in the month was book 1, Revved to the Max. Like I said, book 1 in the Reynolds Restoration series. This is Charlie and Maxx. I gave it 5 stars. This was my first Melanie Moreland. I had a lot of fun with this. Didn't really know what to expect. This has actually been on my TBR for a little bit because I saw in a newsletter from Claire Kingsley a while ago. I don't know if it was when this was released or when a later book in the series was released, but it was just as a recommendation in her newsletter. And I was like, well, I love Claire Kingsley, and she said it had vibes similar to like Evan Bailey, which is my favorite Bailey's Brothers book, and I was just like, okay, so I picked it up. Reynolds Restoration, the entire series is set around a car repair shop / motorcycle restoration shop, and so it's like adjacent to my real life job, which is super crazy. I work for a repair shop, but we focus on like lawnmowers and lawn equipment and not like cars or things like that. I will say there was one tiny little moment where she talks about how, oh yeah, they started out with lawnmowers and then they moved up. And I'm just like, lawnmowers are completely different. Like, we've had customers come in who are like, I am a top level Porsche mechanic. I cannot get this stupid lawnmower to run. They are their own little thing. I mean, I'm not saying you can't work on both, but if you are just trained in mechanics for cars, you might know some basic stuff, but there are lawnmowers that just are completely different, let alone going into commercial mowers. So that was like my one little, but that's okay. So Charlie is in a pretty bad situation. Her roommate has basically stolen all her money and then ran off. And then she comes to find out that the rent that she would give her half of the rent to her roommate, and then she would just give all the money to the guy, and come to find out for the past few months she had instead been pocketing the money and sleeping with the landlord in a form of rent payment. So things are bad. She's about to get evicted. She's lost all of her money and pretty much everything valuable, and she finds a job basically becoming like a paid housewife and office assistant for Maxx, who is the owner of Reynolds Restoration. And so she comes in to kind of get his household into shape and get his shop into shape. And when she like first starts there, and it's like talking about like setting up the office filing and setting up all of these, like it definitely had like the work aspect of my own job, but then the like updating and bringing things to modern that I had when I was the office manager of the landscaping company I worked for before he retired, because I definitely had to do something similar, like update how things were being filed, get, you know, proper apps and get things more technologically like in this era. Like, let's not talk about the fact that, like, my boss and I like to joke that when I started there, he had a time clock. Not the 1880s, but that was, like, the joke. It was probably more like the 1980s, which is still 40 years old, but it just had a lot of similarities to my job that was a little too close to home, but I had fun. It was very steamy. Wasn't expecting that. Definitely, I shouldn't want you, but I want you. It's an age gap. Obviously, close proximity. Yeah, and I had a lot of fun with it. So then I picked up book 2 right away, and that is Breaking the Speed Limit. And this is Gabby and Stefano's book. So in book 1, Charlie kind of pushes Maxx to expand the business, start hiring extra mechanics so he can focus on the restoration. And by the end of book 1, he has 2 employees, Stefano and Brett. Brett is the first one, and then Stefano is like Brett's friend who gets pulled into the business as well. By the time we hit the beginning of book 2, there's more mechanics working there. There's like a parts runner and like a guy to drive the car to go pick up people and pick up parts and things like that. And it's like exploding, which is super fun. To just see that all the changes like Charlie and Maxx are doing is like really working and creating a successful business for both them and all their employees who are becoming their family. And that hit close because I love working for a small family-owned business, and there was just a lot of things that reminded me of work in a good way. So, and then like Charlie putting away parts, because that's like one of my number one jobs, is doing inventory and checking in parts and putting away parts and ordering parts, and it's a whole thing. But it really touched me, just the setting of the series, and I feel like it was really well done. Even though it's different enough with car stuff, I know that a lot of car places don't really keep parts on stock like we do. There was enough similarities that it really resonated with me. But anyway, this specific book is Stefano and Gabby. And Gabby is a single mom, also coming from a bad situation. She has her son's father is not a good person. She's kind of been running and hiding from him. And she's having car problems. And Stefano runs across her and, you know, helps her change her tire, and then offers, gives her a card for Reynolds Restoration, and is like, they'll give you a good deal, and they're super attracted to each other. And then he offers her deal, and then he kind of helps her out behind the scenes and offering her a deal, seeing what, the shop can do to kind of help her get back on her feet, because it's obvious that like her car isn't worth repair. It's in really bad shape, but she doesn't have the money to fix it, and she's really kind of struggling with keeping it going enough. Plus she has her son, and so they're like, this isn't safe for your son or you to be in there, but they're playing on the it's not safe for your son route. So I enjoyed this as well. I definitely enjoyed seeing the business, how it's grown, seeing everybody. Stefano does a lot of like the art design for the restorations, which was really cool. However, I give this one a 3.5 stars. I rounded it up to 4 on Goodreads, but this one I struggled with the romance. It just felt too physical based to me, and I was missing. And while the first book had a lot of steam and a lot of physical chemistry, I also really felt the emotional connection between Charlie and Maxx, and I saw the emotional connection between Stefano and Gabby, but it felt too quick and not enough. And then there was a situation where her ex kind of comes back into the picture, and everybody is like willing to like basically put their lives on the line for her without even really knowing her at that point. And I get like wanting to help somebody in that situation, but the fact that they were like willing to put themselves in such a dangerous situation without even hearing from her the full situation, especially with Charlie pregnant with their second child. Like, I was really surprised Maxx was like all on board with that possible threat turning to Charlie and their children. So I was like, this feels a little funky to me, a little too good to be true. And Gabby pushed against that because she had the same feeling, which helped me kind of get past it a little bit. But she still didn't really explain everything to them. Like, if somebody is willing to like put their life on a line is a little over dramatic for the situation, but it still kind of has that connotation. I just felt like I wish she was more open with everybody, and more open with Stefano earlier on in the book about her situation and how bad it was. And then, it was a little stereotypical that she gets spooked and she tries to run away and she pushes Stefano away. And I was like, you saw it coming. It happened earlier than I expected it to, but you knew it was going to happen, and that she was going to say mean things to push him away and start ghosting him because she was going to pack up all her stuff with her son and move on and not tell him. And it was like, it was a whole thing. So I definitely didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one. And then I was slightly nervous going into book 3. But book 3 was book club book, and that was Shifting Gears. So this is Brett and Kelly's story, which is interesting because, like I said, Brett was the first person that was hired after Maxx and Charlie at Reynolds Restoration in book 1. And Kelly is Charlie's like best friend. So I feel like typically this would be book 2 if you're going like when we meet the characters kind of in the series. But I liked this one a lot better. I gave this one 4 stars. It still didn't quite sweep me away as much as the first one, but I will say part of that is because I struggle with second chance romance, and this is second chance romance. However, this is one of the better second chance romance and situation because Kelly is a photographer's assistant. She wants to become a photographer herself full time, and so she's traveling a lot. She's constantly on the go. She's in and out, and she's visiting Charlie, and she's visiting basically her nieces and nephew. I don't know why I'm completely blanking. I don't even remember Charlie and Max's kids' names. Oh my gosh. But she's in to visit them and visit Charlie. And Charlie is definitely pushing her to settle down, start building some roots. And sometimes I felt Charlie pushed a little too much. And because she was pushing too much, Kelly was definitely like even more averse to the situation. And I get that like Charlie could see that's what she was really kind of missing, but she didn't understand that's what she was missing. There were a couple times where I was like, come on, Charlie, just, pushing her isn't going to help the situation. It's going to make it worse if you want her to be around more and, hang out. But I really liked overall, like, how do I best say this? I really loved the ending and where we got to with Brett and Kelly. I just didn't, there was a couple nitpicky things I didn't enjoy on their journey, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm intrigued to read more in the series for sure. I feel like I should have started these earlier because that also could have been reading them back to back. While I used to be able to binge series, now I find out if I at least space them out by a book, unless it's something I'm like so completely engrossed in, I do kind of struggle continuing on, which may be part of why my reading was so slow at the beginning of the month, is because, not that I didn't enjoy these books, obviously I did. I mean, 5, 4, and a 3.5 star. I think maybe because it like put me in a little bit of a funk because I was like stuck in this. So we'll see. It's interesting to think back now that I've said that out loud, that maybe that was part of why my reading was so slow in the beginning of the month. I'll have to ruminate on that more. That's really intriguing. But I'm going to stop blabbering about those and we will move on. So the next book I read was Eragon by Christopher Paolini. This is the first book in his inheritance cycle. I know that the newest book is coming out soon in this series, and so a lot of people were doing a reread of the series. I saw Jen from the book Revved and Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life kind of they're doing like their own little buddy read, and I immediately was like, I'd like to check it out. So I put a hold on the ebook and the audiobook from my library way back when. It was definitely several months ago, and it was like a 16+ week wait, and the audiobook finally came in, and so I listened to the audiobook while I worked on my September drills and chills for 2023. So what I will say, I vlogged it. It is a half reading, half crafting vlog, which was super fun. I had so much fun doing it and talking about crafting and getting back into crafting really, and reading and listening to audiobooks while doing that. And that's also part of my problem is now I'm like, and I've been wanting to craft things, and then I was like, I'm crafting things. I'm having so much fun. So I wanted to craft more, and I was like, I just need to pick up more audiobooks, and then I can do both at the same time. So that's where I'm at in life, is I just have too many things that I would like to do. But I vlogged it all, like I said. So I will pop the video up here so you can get my full thoughts about Eragon. But I will say 5 stars. This is the fantasy book that I was saying where I think it's supposed to have a romantic plot line at some point, but I didn't quite get to like the full romancy elements. But there's definitely some hints that Eragon's going to find a true love, possibly an elven princess that we met at the end of the book. So I'm intrigued, and my hold has been on hold for a while now. I should have put my hold on the other books right away, but I didn't. I waited until after I finished, and then I was like, I gotta put a hold on the second book, and it was like, you have a long wait again, and I was like, dang it, I should have, as soon as the first book came in, I should have put a hold on the second book, but it is what it is. So let us move on. Then she's just absolutely full of it over there. I picked up my second book club read-along book of the month, and that was Bayou Moon by Ilona Andrews. I ended up reading like 100 pages of this, and I didn't get it done in time for the read-along live show, which is fine because I ended up having plans that night anyway, but I decided to pick this up on audiobook because physically it just wasn't doing it for me. I was struggling to pick it up. I was struggling to read just in general. But as soon as I picked up the audiobook, I flew through it in like 2 days. I super enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. This is the second book in their Edge series. Now, these are urban fantasy romances. However, this series is 4 books long, and they are interconnected standalones. So each book focuses on a different couple, which is super different for them. It's definitely one of their earlier series, and it has connections to the Innkeeper Chronicles. So I am super enjoying the series so far. Like I said, this is book 2. I gave it 5 stars. I will say this was like a perfect one to read as we're getting into spooky season because this was gory. It definitely had some horror elements. The first time we are in the POV of Spider, who's like the main villain of this book, he does like genetic body modifications, experimentations with like magical creatures, like there's magic. It's like super crazy. So in this series, that you have like Earth as you know it, and then there's this magical world. And where the two worlds collide, there's a strip of land all along that border called the Edge. And it's a mix of both worlds. And so this series is mostly set in the Edge. And in this book, we have William, who is a wolf changeling, who we meet in the first book. And he is tasked to track Spider down, who has been a nemesis of his for quite a while now. And he has to figure out why he's in the Bayou area of the edge, and also figure out what he's after and steal it for the Hand is the group that he's like tasked to work for. And he comes across Cerise, who he calls her Queen of the Hobos because she looks like she's homeless and she's like in full like swamp witch cosplay, but not quite cosplay. And it's their romance and it's super fun. But like I say, go into this book specifically expecting some gore, expecting some horror. The big battle fight and like the last half hour of this book, I was finishing it at work and I just felt my mouth drop open at what was happening about like people getting beheaded. And it's like this really even gorier than other books that we've read by them. It was a lot more like horror, gory, like R-rated instead of just like action adventure with some death. And I know my mouth was open at some points, and before I could like comprehend what exactly was happening, like something else crazy would happen, and I could just feel like my jaw unhinging because I just couldn't contain. I had to pause several times and just be like, wait, I need to process. Did this just come out of an Ilona Andrews book? It was so gory. I had fun with it, but I definitely feel like if you go into this book expecting that, okay, like, but like I said, the first POV we got from Spider, I was just like, this is different vibes. And so I was able to kind of pull myself back a little bit from expecting extremely similar vibes to the first book. So I just want to throw that out there because I didn't see very much said until after we read the book for book club. So there's that. 5 stars. Still love it. Ilona Andrews, one of my favorite authors. And I love it. Okay. We're halfway through. And I read that book around like the 20-something of the month. It was after the 20th because 20th was book club, I believe. So, yeah, like I said, the back half of the month was definitely heavy loaded. So then I was like, we're going to keep going with audiobooks. And I wanted to make sure that I managed to hit my 5 subgenres that I like to read in. So I was like, I need a paranormal book, a sci-fi, and a historical. So I picked up Rescued by Her Bear by Felicity Heaton. This is the second book in her Black Ridge Bears series. And it's been a while since I read book 1. I read book 1 at like the beginning of this year. But it was super fun to get back into this. I was remembering things as they kind of happened. The timeline for this book slightly overlaps with the first book. Maybe 50%. Like 50% of the other book is timeline is part of this book, but it's not 50% of this book, if that makes sense. But this is Lo. He's one of the twin brother bears. The first book is about Saint, who's the alpha of their bear shifter clan. Totally forgot that this series was set in Colorado. I was like, oh yeah. But this was super fun. I gave it 4 stars, fated mates. We have our heroine is Cameo, and she is a park ranger, and her brother had gotten on, the wrong side of the law, working with people who were dealing drugs, and stole a bunch of money from them. And then to kind of try to escape from them with the money when he's captured after the fact, he tells them, I gave all the money to my sister. Well, he didn't. He was just hoping that by saying that they'd let him go to touch base with his sister, get the money, and then return it to him. And then he was hoping that when they let him go, he can just run away. And instead they kill him and then start threatening Cameo and their parents. And Cameo ends up going on the run, and she's on the run up in the forests in the Rocky Mountains, and 2 of the gang people track her down, and shots are fired. And then Lo and his brother hear them. Lo's like, you head to the cabins for the winter. I'm going to go check that out, make sure it wasn't like a bear or an animal that was hunted, because now it's not like when people are supposed to be hunting, and we want to make sure that like no female animals are being killed because that's bad for the ecosystem, and I'll meet you up there. And instead he finds Cameo injured and fighting with one of the two men, and he manages to kind of pick her up and kind of head back to the cabins with her. They end up having to spend the night in a cave because they can't move that fast with her injury. And so we've got close proximity and, you know, at times forced proximity for sure, because we've got a blizzard coming in. And yeah, they're fated mates. It's super quick. I had a lot of fun with these. I definitely think I prefer the Blackridge Bear so far over her Cougar series, which this spun off of. Cougar Creek, I think. But 4 stars. I had a lot of fun, and I'm excited to, maybe I'll finish the series. There's only 4 books, but I'm excited to get back to more Felicity Heaton because she's definitely a favorite paranormal fantasy author of mine. I definitely enjoy her books. Then I finally got to my arc for Ruling Sikthand by Victoria Aveline. This is the 7th book in her Cleeton series. This definitely leads off of book 6, Resisting Maxx. And this is Sikthand and Sophia's book. 5 stars. Are we surprised? I love Victoria Aveline. She's one of my favorite sci-fi authors. This is one of my favorite sci-fi series. I have all of them in paperback. This is the one I have pre-ordered. Technically, it's not pre-ordered, but as soon as the paperback goes live, I will be buying it. So that's why I considered it pre-ordered. If I could pre-order it, it would be. But I had so much fun with this. So at the end of Resisting Maxx, Sikthand and things are happening politically with the Queen of Tremantia, which is where everybody, where the humans have been kind of centered on Cleeton. And during that book, a group of human women are like traveling around to a bunch of the different cities on the planet, so more people can be introduced to humans and potentially meet their fated mate, kind of a situation. And so there's a lot going on. And when they get to Valuridica, I think I should have written it down, but it starts with a V. And when they're there, things implode or explode, I guess. And Sikthand decides to hold all the humans and their guards hostage. And, you know, to try to force the queen to really kind of push to getting Earth to not be a class 4 planet, because as a class 4 planet, no contact is allowed. And now that Cleetonians know that humans are reproductively compatible, they can keep Cleetonians from dying out, because they have this really interesting way of men going to marriage school because the number of females is dwindling. And so, you know, there's a lot of societal rules and structures put in place to help keep them from dying out, basically. And now that humans are now known to be compatible with Cleetonians and even bring back fated mate situations, everyone's really excited, and they're like, we need to start pushing. We need to have the universal councils start pushing to get Earth classified higher than level 4, so we can start reaching out and making contact and, you know, opening up Earth's galactic borders, so to speak. And things are happening in different countries. Then there's people working with the new Queen of Tremantia, and there's people working against. And what ends up happening is Sophia and Sikthand kind of are forced into an idea, or an idea is brought up that a good option to kind of help make their city somewhere where humans would want to go to, and to really kind of benefit from having a human's perspective, is to have basically a marriage of convenience so she can be queen. And it happens, and we know going into this, if you've read the entire series, fated mates, they are fated mates. It takes them a while to get there. This one is definitely more slow burn than the other ones, I feel like. But it was so worth it. Sikthand is like this heavy metal, armored up, damaged soft boy deep inside his armor. It's just so good. We got the space dragons. We've got a lot of tattooing situations, and that was like really beautiful to see because Sophia was a graphic artist on Earth, and she designed a lot of her tattoos, and they were really meaningful to her. And when they were abducted and their bodies were healed by this advanced like medicine and technology, they removed all her tattoos while she was still unconscious, so she couldn't even be like, no, I want to keep them, heal me outside of that. The machines just thought it was a skin thing, and so it was healing their skin, and so all of their tattoos disappeared. But there is a way to tattoo things that's like based on this magnetic or they turn into ink, and then they use like a magnet after they inject it to like do the design, and it sounds super even more painful but it is so cool. And this book made me cry a lot. It had me fighting for things, and I loved how Sophia just wouldn't let the grief and the suffering that Sikthand has been through and the walls that he's built, she wouldn't let him continue to push her away. She really fought against anything like stereotypical happening. Like it's so good. I don't want to spoil it, but if you haven't read the series and you enjoy sci-fi romance or you're interested in sci-fi romance, I really recommend this. This series is so good. It's one of my favorites. Book 1 is Choosing Theo. And just be prepared to binge because I love it. We get a sneak peek of Rhaego. He pops in for a minute, and he is like one that Victoria Aveline fans is like waiting for his book, and who knows what's coming next. I'm still waiting for her to announce it, but I'm a part of her Patreon, so as soon as she starts teasing, I will be one of the first to know, and I cannot freaking wait. So there is Ruling Sikthand, if you couldn't tell, 5 stars. Then, to kind of finish up the month, I was like, let's get some novellas in. Let's kind of try to boost up the number of books I read a little bit. So, I ended up picking up A Night at the Tropicana by Chanel Cleeton. Now, this is a historical romance, but it's half set in the 1930s and then the 1960s, I think. And this mostly takes place in Cuba. This is really short, like 40, 50 pages. I got this as Amazon Prime first reads or an Amazon Prime read, something like that. Technically the release date is in October, but I think it was one of the Amazon first reads that I get, which you get like books a month earlier than they're supposed to release. So I had it early. Didn't realize that at the time that it hadn't come out until I went to put my stats in, and I was like, oh, this book isn't even technically out yet. But this was super cute. I definitely enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars because I just wanted more. I feel like with the like 40, 50 pages that she had, where I really wanted was like at least like a few more pages set in the more current or more recent storyline. So what we have is like the first chapter is set in the 1960s. Our heroine is Natalie. She's a doctor. I want to say they're in Miami, but her mother is from Cuba. And so her mother's parents immigrated from Cuba, and they're doing this hospital charity thing for the hospital she works for, and it's themed A Night at the Tropicana. And then we go back to the 1930s when it was the opening night of the Tropicana in Cuba, and she just happened to be there with her sister and her parents as like a celebration trip during winter break. And so while they're there visiting Cuba for the week and like learning more about their mother's heritage, and it was the first time their mother or they were able to go there, and her father was super excited to go there and like learn more about where their mother's history comes from. It was just really cute. I love the relationship between specifically the heroine and her father, and her mom was definitely a little bit of like a tiger mom. But I thought it was super sweet. And while they're at the opening of the Tropicana, Natalie runs into a boy so at this point, Natalie's in college to become a doctor, and she runs into a young man who is a doctor. He's in his like early 20s, and his name is Antonio, and they have this really magical night, and he gives her his number or his address so they can write letters to each other, and then something happens and they're never able to meet. And so most of the book takes place with them and that night at the Tropicana. So we've got like the first chapter and like the last chapter is set in the more modern time, which is still technically historical because it's the 1960s. But it is them reconnecting these 30 years later. And he is now immigrated to America, and he is there because his cousin, I think, is a co-worker of Natalie's. So why I gave it 3.5 stars is because I wanted more of their like actual romance in the 1960s, because we just kind of see them meet together and then they have a dance and it ends. Like, give me 10 more pages of just them really reconnecting, or even just a tiny little couple page epilogue that's like another 10 years later or another 30 years later or something, and show that even though they reconnected later in life in their late 30s, early 40s, that, you know, they have realized that even though they were so young when they first met and they knew there was a connection there, that they were able to rekindle that and have that, and that is the person that they're supposed to be with. So I just was left wanting for the more current day romance aspect of them when they're older. But I still really liked it. I thought, especially when we were in Cuba in the 1930s, it was so lush and really immersive, and I definitely want to check out more books by this author. I was looking, and it seems like a lot of it's just kind of straight historical fiction, but I didn't look too much. I was just kind of scrolling through her Amazon list, or like what recommended to me when I finished the book on my Kindle. But I definitely want to look and see if she has something more romance that's more of like a larger novel, or more novel sized, and see how she develops a romance in that aspect. Or heck, I even take like a second novella of them in the 1960s or whatever. But I really enjoyed it. I just, for the romance aspect, was left wanting. And so 3.5 stars, but 3.5 really, really good stars. And I rounded this one up to 4 stars on Goodreads for sure. Then I picked up Grump Gone Wild by Cassie Mint. This is the first book in her newer series, Grump's Unleashed. I also gave this one 3.5 stars. This is Felicity, but she goes by Fliss, and Sebastian. She works for him. She's been in love with him for years. He comes from, top 1%. He's a 1%er, super rich family, and he always kind of struggles with his family because they're definitely like one of the names, like think Rockefellers, Kennedys, like one of the names when you hear, oh, you're that rich. But she doesn't care about that. She's fallen in love with him as she's worked side by side with him for, I think it's like 4 years or something like that. And finally she's like, I don't know why you even bother going home. It always puts you in a mood. And he's like, well, why don't you come home and pretend to be my date so my mom doesn't try to set me up with some socialite again? And so Fliss agrees, and it kind of forces both of them to finally push past their unrequited feelings. And it was super cute. I mean, I gave it 3.5 stars. It's a Cassie Mint book. It's not my favorite I've read by her, but it's definitely not the worst I've read by her. So a 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I did want a little bit more from, like, I wanted less insecurities from Fliss, or if not less insecurities from her, more recognition of those, and more, not that he didn't need to put effort into it, but I just more, I guess, support from Sebastian's side. It felt like he was a little too willing to kind of just let Fliss take care of his family how she could, and he wasn't gonna step in to, and he was gonna try to stay neutral. But I did wish that he would have taken Fliss's side a little bit more at times, until we got to like the end big third act conflict situation. But I enjoyed it. I'm definitely interested to read more. I feel like Cassie Mintz, definitely, if you're looking for a spicy, quick novella, she's, I think, one of the easiest, I feel like, to get into when it comes to that kind of thing, and I'll probably be picking up more of her during the novella-thon later on this month, so just throwing that out there. And then the final book we have, A Scot Mess by Caroline Lee. And we're over 45 minutes. How did I only read 10 books and we're at 45 minutes? I'm talking too much about these books. It's because I'm like, I don't have very many books, so let's talk about them a lot. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I talked about them too much. Welcome to my life as somebody who is very quiet, very introverted. And then I sit down to film these clips about books, and you cannot shut me up because it's just me and my cat and the camera. But anyway, I read A Scot Mess by Caroline Lee. This is the first book in her Hot for Scots series. This is twins upon twins upon twins. There are twins galore in this book. There are twin shenanigans. This definitely had some cliche moments. You could kind of see what was coming, what was going to happen. But I feel like the humor just... I found myself chuckling, both partly in like, really, this is where we went, and like actual like funniness. But, you know, I have pretty easy humor to, like, I find a lot of things very funny very easily, except for like stoner humor. That's like the only humor where I'm just like, not for me. But this is super fun. So we have... basically, I can't remember his name, but the laird of this area has a bunch of sons. However, they're illegitimate sons. He only has one illegitimate child, and it is a daughter. But he doesn't want his good-for-nothing cousin to take over as laird of their clan. So he puts forth a decree, I guess, basically, that all of his sons have to get married, and the first one to give him a bairn to bounce on his knee will be the laird. And nobody really wants to be the laird except for one of the brothers. But our hero in this book is Finn, and he has two sets of twins, which is crazy. And so we've got Finn here, and Duncan, I think, is Finn's twin brother. And then there's another set of twin brothers who are younger than them. But Finn recently, over like the summer or whatever, fell in love with Fiona, who is also a twin herself. And they're both identical twins, which is funny. But she and Finn meet when they're in some sort of trading marketplace, and they have this instant connection, and then they end up writing to each other all winter because you can't really travel around. Everybody kind of hunkers down. And then, you know, when it starts hitting spring and summer, everybody's out traveling and trading what they can or whatever before the next winter. And so when he gets this decree, he's like, finally. And so he's like, invites Fiona to come over to get married to him. And he cannot wait. He knows she is the one for him. He and he's just so excited to meet her. And then we have fun little twin antics where they like don't realize they're talking to the other twin, going both directions. It was a little stereotypical for like the big final third act conflict kind of a thing with the whole twin situation when you saw it coming, but I still enjoyed the way it went down. And while I got a little like angry at Fiona about like, really Fiona, I just like the way that Finn handled it and his brother. And I just was like, I can't wait to read more for sure. And yeah, so 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super fun. It was pretty quick. This was on Hoopla, and I'm definitely intrigued to read more in this series. I think this will be a fun, easy, almost like a rom-com historical audiobook that I can pick up just for like a little pick-me-up or a palate cleanser between other like bigger, deeper audiobooks. So I had fun with it. 4 stars. And that's it. Those are the 10 books and my long ramblings about those 10 books, except for Eragon, because if we talked about Eragon, I don't even want to know how long this video would have been, but you have a whole video to get my Eragon thoughts on for that. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to leave me a comment down below, let me know what your favorite book for the month of September was. If you'd like to just leave me an emoji instead, leave me something dragon related, like an egg or dragon. Is there a dragon emoji? Maybe some fire, maybe a volcano, whatever says dragon to you. But otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all soon with another video.